Good evening. This is Kenneth and Heather with the Advancing Equity Coalition here to give you a quick recap of last night's MPS school board meeting. Heather, how are you doing today?
What a day. What a day. Now, the question is, do you have any snow or ice left in your yard?
So I did a quick check. I've done a pretty good job all kind of like the last few weeks trying to break up as much ice as possible. There's like a tiny, tiny mound of snow in like the back corner. It's not even in my yard technically, but it is still around. So yes, just a tiny, tiny bit. But what about you?
Just a little sliver. Yep. Hanging on. But I also see lots of new green things coming up. So that's very exciting.
Well, let's get into it. You want to do a quick rundown of what went down last night at the school board meeting?
Yeah, so last night there was quite a bit of public comment, and really there were, about four themes. So we heard again from ESPs asking the district once again to consider adding that for those 5 additional hours to their contract permanently. Um, we heard again from heritage students and families asking the district to consider making their school a magnet school. We heard several comments asking the district to have a student off day and to close Minneapolis public schools for Eid. And then we also had some public comments talking about different perspectives on the conversation around school closures, which seems to be kind of humming around. Then, we really heard a budget update. There was an overview of like, these are the things we have to fund called compliance. And then there are things that we couldn't fund and then there were the things that we chose to fund. And so we kind of got an update on that. Then there was a really long and interesting conversation and presentation on our contract alternative schools. And so the contract alternative schools will be, the vote will come before the board in June, where we'll have to decide if we're going to keep those schools, if they're meeting students' needs. And so the board was hearing a presentation on that in a timely manner so that they can have more time to discuss it. And then we had a presentation on newcomers and what our district is sort of kind of learning to support. And actually, I just got to come from an amazing event at Green Academy where there was a huge opportunity for newcomers to get screenings for hearing and vision and some supports and to learn about different programming. And it was really, really beautiful to see it happening at an MPS school. And then the final thing was we had an update on magnets, right? And really it was just a conversation before the board that like, some of the pathways during the CDD finish at middle school or at elementary school, and the board is going to have to come to a decision around if those magnets get a high school and what does it look like if that happens and how does that affect different schools and all of that kind of stuff. So in between all of that we took a break to break fast and to say prayers, and then it was a long meeting.
It was a very long meeting. A lot of presentations, a lot of information packed into last night. But I think it was largely like a pretty successful meeting for the board, and I think they got through a lot of important things. And so I want to show my slide of the night here. And so my slide of the night relates to one of the things that you brought up yesterday or for the meeting yesterday, which is related to the newcomers. So newcomers in Minneapolis are kind of defined as like recently moved to the country and have like a language proficiency of 1 or 2. And so this is what our population looks like of newcomers who just came to Minneapolis this year. And even since January, we have had 400, and just in January and February, actually, we've had 423 newcomers come into the district. Of the 1,100 newcomers that currently enrolled in the district, 611 are Spanish speaking, and most of them are from Ecuador. And then we also have this large population who's moved, and this new population of newcomers that have come from Afghanistan. And so, our population in Minneapolis is growing. It is becoming much more diverse, and we have a lot of needs to meet. And because we know that these newcomers deserve quality access to education, and that means we have to provide ways for them to access education while they are also developing their English language skills. And that, we want Minnesota and Minneapolis to be this inclusive place where people continue to see Minnesota as a place to come and bring, their culture, their values, their diversity. And we need to make sure that we are open and receptive and making sure that they can access those services. They can access a quality standard of life, and the type of education that they are entitled to, as residents in Minneapolis and students in Minneapolis public schools. So it was interesting to hear them talk about that, also in conjunction with, then what do we do, especially for this large group of new Spanish speakers, and what that means for, some of the Spanish dual immersion pathways and the magnets, and, do we create a magnet pathway all the way through high school? Do we dedicate a middle school solely to Spanish dual immersion? What type of opportunities are we making available? So, this isn't at the shifting population is also at a critical juncture as we talk about so many different decisions that are also in the balance right now, and these decisions should be based on who are in our schools and what services do they need. So I think it's important that we're talking about this all at the same time.
I mean, and if you look at just 423, that's like a solid elementary school size, right? I mean, so we're talking about things like, these are, very impactful numbers. This is also a beautiful opportunity. And I just, again, what I see our district managing to pull off, in order to meet needs, what I saw tonight was just incredible. Like we are just, I mean, I don't know. It's amazing what we can pull off with not enough funding.
Yeah, certainly. So with that, let's go into our most valuable moment from last night's board meeting. Heather, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, okay, so it was not really this big part of the meeting, but right toward the end of the meeting, one thing that Director Elamine and Director Beachy talked about was that they have been working together to have sort of a safety conversation with other lawmakers and influential folks around the city. Director Elamine even mentioned having invited folks to break fast and to have iftar dinner at her mosque. I think that this type of leadership is exactly what we need at MPS right now. We do need to sort of ask for support outside of MPS for student safety. And so it just really moved me that on top of all of the other things that board members do, that they're sort of taking on this leadership in this role. And I'm really curious to learn more about how their conversations are going.
Yeah, definitely. I'll say my most valuable moment yesterday was seeing the board approve a change to the calendar to include Eid as a day off for all students in Minneapolis public schools. I think it was, and I know it's a complicated decision, and it changed a lot of logistics for lots of families, lots of schools. Also adding an extra day to the school year, because we know that some schools without that day will not have their instructional hours. And it was important to be responsive to a major group of students in a major community here in Minneapolis. Thinking about, I believe 4 of the current school board members are fasting right now for Ramadan. And to mark the end of Ramadan with Eid, and for the district to recognize that as a significant day, and to allow families to fully embrace that day and engage that day without feeling like they're missing something or having to decide whether to go to school or and also for staff in Minneapolis public schools. And, I think that's important too, that, they aren't forced to go to work or feel like they're missing something from work because the school district continues to operate on, one of the holiest and most significant days for them. So I thought it was a great move. I think it also was a great demonstration of culturally responsive leadership. And, again, I think representation really matters for reasons like this, for us to not have an oversight or to just say like, well, we already made the calendar, we can't change it. Like, no, we know what this means to so many families. And so I thought it was just a great moment for the district to make that move and to then figure out, like, we're going to have to deal with the logistics of that now too. So along with families. So.
Yep. And I think, it might not be perfect. It might be a little bumpy, but we'll learn from it. And in the meantime, a group of families will know that their culture matters in MPS. Well, okay, so let's go on to do better moments.
Yeah.
So, so for me, I think there was a long conversation about contract alternative schools last night, which were described as the schools where we send children whose needs our district cannot meet in a traditional public school. And Director Emmerich really made some comments that landed with me, which was like, so why does any child in our district have to leave our school system in order to have their needs met? And then we also have to acknowledge that a large group of those students are predominantly brown and Black students. And we heard a very honest answer from Dr. Harris-Berry when they said, like, why? And she said, because of overdiscipline. Most kids in our contract alternative schools come through the path of overdiscipline. And so, I think it begs the question, right? Of like, maybe we need contract alternative schools for a time, but at some point, just like we proved we could be nimble with EAD, at some point, I think we have to ask ourselves if we need 8 schools to meet needs of students that are non-traditional, then maybe we should toss more tradition out. More racism. But I think I'd like our board to really wrestle with us saying that this is the plan. And this is no knock on contract alternative schools. Sounds like there's some people doing really beautiful work. It's not about that. It's about the way we see students.
Yeah. 100%. So my do better moment was related to a couple of the comments during public comment that were made about recommending specific schools to close as part of this like buzzing conversation that's happening due to like some of the financial information that the district has been putting out. There's a Star Tribune article that raised the question around school closures, and so we know that conversation that conversation is happening in places in spaces, and there's a growing concern, right? There's a growing concern around the need to address at least the financial situation in some way.
Yeah.
And I think with that concern in the air, and for then members of the community to say specific schools should close, is really hard. It's really terrible, especially when we don't know what the district is thinking about how they're going to address their financial instability. And the district hasn't made any indication around how they plan to address it. I think it's just really difficult to start naming specific schools in one part of the city that need to close. And I think we just need to be much more thoughtful about what we're saying and who's it's impacting. I understand there are concerns about the level of educational excellence taking place in certain schools. And we should all be concerned about that. We should always be concerned about that. And we shouldn't use this looming crisis, financial crisis, and the fear that people legitimately have around closing schools to then weaponize saying these are the schools that should close. And then also being mindful of like, who are those schools serving, and where those students, and where are those schools, and what has the district and our city historically done in those parts of the city. I think it wasn't a good moment in the meeting. I think our community is better than that, can be better than that, and will need to be better than that as we continue to figure out how we're going to address school transformation, how we're going to address the financial cliff, the fiscal cliff, and the financial struggles that this district has to remain sustainable. So no easy solutions are on the table right now. And there's a lot of difficult conversations to be had moving forward about how we address some of these issues. But the way that it was brought up yesterday, I thought during public comment, was wholly inappropriate. So
yeah. I think what we need to remember, it kind of brings me back to like some of the comments that folks made when they found out they were going to be pathwayed or proposed pathways to CDD changing to racially isolated schools, and some of the comments they made about those schools. And I think it's important to remember that, and I even remember like when I chose Lindale for my kids, and I remember someone saying no one goes to Lindale, and I was like, well, there are 450 no ones in that building. And so I think as we talk about our city and our district and our need for financial responsibility, it's important to remember that like we are the district. I am the district. You are the district. We are the city. All these babies are our babies. And so when we make comments, to remember that those can land on a child's ears, a parent's ears, a teacher's ears. And we never know what that person is going through or in that moment or what that school means to that family. And let's just, as a community, let's just like think about impact of our words more than like, I think that it's hard. We want to make a point, but we got to think about the impact of our words.
Yeah, totally.
Well, all right.
Thank y'all for listening. Appreciate it. Follow us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. I'm melting over here, so we know that it's a beautiful day.
I was going to say, you usually have a blanket on your lap.
So I hope you're enjoying the sun and continue to figure out how we continue to fight for educational equity with us. So thank y'all for listening. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Okay, bye.